So NTT, I believe the stats would say you're the third largest data center provider in the world, which is a pretty impressive sort of stat. But from my perspective, and I don't know if it's correct, the general market, you seem to have maybe a slightly lower profile than some of the other sort of colo folks that shout from the rooftops all the time. I mean, A, is that a fair observation? And B, is there a reason for that? Or are you sort of beginning to become more public facing? Well, I don't know, just thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think initially it's a fair observation. I think there are historic reasons for that as well. We're better known within regions and markets under our former affiliate names. And in 2019, we formed NTT Limited. And as part of that, we merged and integrated 31 different affiliate companies, and NTT had previously grown predominantly through acquisition of those. So from a colo perspective, certainly within region, the names that would have been more familiar to people, such as eShelter in Europe, Raging Wire in the US, NetMagic in India, whereas the NTT Communications name was more synonymous with colocation operations within APAC and Japan historically as well. So we formed NTT Global Data Centers in October of 2019, following the formation of NTT Limited as our divisional parent. And so effectively, we've been going through an integration and rebrand exercise since then. So it's a message we are starting to get out, and hopefully the perception from the market will change in the coming months.
Okay, so you have this substantial global data center footprint. I'm also aware that you are quite big in, shall we say, connectivity technology. And I think you also play in the sort of ICT, do significant work around the hardware in the ICT stack. So can you give us just, I guess, some idea of the integration? Do those three things sort of operate completely in isolation, or is there a lot of crossover? What's the sort of connection between those?
Yeah, so I guess the easiest way to look at us as global data centers, we're with a layer one platform of that full stack service. So NTT Group, obviously on a larger, wider scale than NTT Limited, we provide a range and multitude of services right across the ICT stack. So from the data center perspective, we're very much focused on providing both data center colocation capacity, also connectivity, and this single converged platform that then enables those technology services to be delivered upon that service platform. So as NTT Global Data Centers, we've obviously got large scale colocation capacity globally. We've also then got our interconnection. It's underpinned. We own our own global IP backbone as well, which is IPv6 compliant, which has coverage in, I think, more than 190 countries now, and also significant submarine cable operations as well, and investments going into that sector. So very much, as I said, focused on that layer one infrastructure platform, and then the rest of the divisions within the group can provide services upon that.
Okay, and in terms of the data center portfolio, one of the main reasons for chatting today is you are expanding that, and I guess if we start off with I think you're building new data centers. You can perhaps define that, because some people, new data centers is adding a hall to an existing one. Other people, it's a brand new, greenfield or whatever. But you are building sort of new data center capacity in London, Malaysia, and Silicon Valley as well. Can you give us a little bit about detail about that?
Yeah, so we're expanding across all of our regions in response to significant demand, which obviously the entire sector is seeing at the moment. But yeah, specifically within London, we've just opened in Dagenham, which will be our flagship East London campus there. We've got expansion underway as well in Hemel Hempstead, which was part of our legacy Gyron business, which was also integrated into the global data centers platform. In Malaysia, Indonesia, so we have Cyberjaya and also Bekasi, which are opening and expanding. And in the US as well, Hillsborough, Chicago, Phoenix, as well as expanding operations in Ashburn as well. So I think Hillsborough, you touched on the connectivity point, is an interesting one. So we'll be connecting with our PC1 NTT submarine cable as well. So from west coast of US across to Tokyo there. And we're also investing to develop our GDCI interconnect fabric platform as well. So there'll be an additional 30 points of interconnect opening there. We're effectively linking up all of the data centers, providing increased connectivity options, increased cloud connectivity options, as well as part of the portfolio.
Okay, and I think Johannesburg and Madrid are also on the list of places where you're planning to build as well. Is that right?
Yeah, so we're well underway in both. We have Madrid, which is in Las Rojas, just on the outskirts of Madrid, and then we're building in Midrand in Joburg, and we already have quite extensive operations there through our Dimension Data business. Obviously, needs no introduction, being a significant South African player over a long period of time. So yeah, it was a market that sort of fell naturally for us from the data center perspective. There are existing data centers there already through Internet Solutions, and so we took the opportunity to build a ground-up development there in Joburg as well, which will deliver 12 megabyte T-load, and will be open next year.
And in terms of this expansion, I mean, is it merely a reflection of the whole world is becoming more and more digital, and therefore there's just more capacity, data center capacity required, or are there any particular local reasons for some or all of those building? Are there any particular sort of industries or applications that are thriving, or is it, as I say, just literally more people want data center space because they're undergoing digital transformation, and that's what you're giving them?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mix of all those factors. So we're obviously seeing increased adoption, digital transformation at the enterprise level. But obviously globally, we're also seeing, a huge driver is B2C, OTT content, and it's all about proximity to eyeballs. And so, previously providers could serve people remotely. Now there's obviously increased pressure to get proximity to eyeballs to deliver infrastructure into those markets, and where they are populous markets and where there are significant number of end users. So it's socio-demographic factors that kick in there as well. And obviously in markets such as Africa, India, LATAM, where there is a large scale population, but not necessarily sufficient developed infrastructure, that's why we're seeing huge growth there.
And I have to ask, because it's one of the standard questions of everyone, the pandemic we can't ignore. So are you able to sort of briefly outline how that, is what you're doing now in any way a reflection of what's happened during the pandemic, or was it, as a lot of people have said, things were already in place, the pandemic has merely accelerated a lot of trends that, I say, were going to happen, or how do you see the pandemic's impact?
Yeah, I would say I don't think we've necessarily seen any new or unexpected demand. It's just, as you say, it's been brought forward in a number of markets. That's all. The pandemic obviously impacted everybody in terms of supply chain development. We're a large scale developer. We had a number of projects ongoing across a number of countries, and we obviously had issues there, as hit all of the industry. But I think thankfully we have very robust procurement supply chain provisions in place. Our operations teams, as I'm sure everybody's did across the industry, really stepped up to the plate and delivered for us, and also on the construction side. So that was fine. We've seen growth, but this is really brought forward growth and capacity demands coming forward maybe 12 to 18 months. But it was already forecast capacity and demand that we've seen.
Okay, and moving on, perhaps we talked briefly about the connectivity, so expertise that NTT has. How clearly it's great you can offer that, connecting your own data centers, etc. But does it have a life of its own as well? So it's not just connect your data centers, you offer it to, if you like, third parties or end users that aren't in your data centers. And also, I think you referenced the submarine cable in Asia, but is there room for plans to expand other networks, whether they're undersea or I'll stop in a minute, but again, I don't know if 5G impacts on you guys at all, or if that's for the telco companies. Yeah, Sorry to ask so much in one go.
No, no, it's quite all right. I'll sort of try and break it down and address it bit by bit. So yeah, our divisions all operate autonomously as well. So the connectivity isn't solely to support the data center business, and historically NTT is obviously a large scale telco player, and we have, as I said already, our expansive global internet backbone. We're a large scale transit provider for a number of carriers, enterprises, a variety of customers there as well. On the submarine side, it's a similar story. So we have the MIST cable, which we're currently building and deploying as well, which is a submarine cable in APAC, connecting Singapore, Myanmar, Malaysia, and India as well. So that will then have cable landing stations into Mumbai and Chennai, which are two areas we're seeing significant growth there, both on the data center and the telco capacity side of things as well. So that's a significant cable project. It's 11,000 kilometers of cable that are being laid at the moment. That will be ready and live in 2023. And so, that will just be a welcome new addition to our submarine portfolio as well. But yeah, people can procure from us by capacity directly through those divisions. It doesn't necessarily have to be data center based.
And just the last bit, which in the end of the was about 5G. Is 5G, is that you directly, or are you connecting the 5G services via your sort of backbone, but you're not going to get directly involved in 5G?
No, so we've also just recently launched our own private 5G solution as well, and we can send you some more information on that one. I won't pretend to be the expert in that field, so I'll do my esteemed colleagues a disservice if I attempt to dive into too much detail there. But no, it's very much, as NTT Group, we are developing technologies and services and solutions right across that full stack, and we see ourselves as a truly full stack service provider. And so, even through our other businesses within the group, so NTT Data, where there are significant investments going on into different technologies, developments, AI, and this type of thing as well. So across the group, I think our R&D spend is now at around $4 billion US per annum. So it's significant. So we're not just focused on those infrastructure service layers. It's right across the full stack.
Okay, and the ICT services. So as we said earlier, data centers, connectivity, ICT, hardware, etc. I'm just thinking that you I won't say you're uniquely placed, but you for the current hybrid environment, I guess, that everyone's talking about, on-premise, managed services, colos, and all the rest. Sounds to me as if you're as well placed a company as most other. You may not want to blow your own trumpet too much, but is that fair to say you're in a pretty good position compared to many other players in this market?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. I mean, we offer our own sort of unique flavor of things, I guess. So you can access via any one of our data centers, and you then get access to NTT World, if you like, and can access a number of those services, managed services, security services, communication lifecycle management. There's a multitude of options there, but also we support a number of third-party partners and service providers as well. So yeah, we have, I guess, revenue opportunities, if you like, coming in from multiple sectors. We're not solely focused like some of our competitors within the data center play. We're not a pure play colocation provider, which is one of the differentiators as well. So yeah, it's very much about this connected world that we can offer to all client types within NTT.
And in terms of that colo market, just quickly, I mean, do you think pure play colo will carry on sort of into the foreseeable future, or do you think it's more likely that organizations such as yourselves, where you offer the third-party data center, but almost inevitably people want other services, and therefore they want it all packaged together rather than go to a colo and have to then onboard other stuff themselves?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like the connectivity discussion that's been ongoing for the past 10 years as well within data centers, about open access. It's all about choice and enablement, and that's what we look to do. And I think that's what will continue to happen. And then the end clients, you may have some enterprises who have more detailed requirements and want a one-stop shop service as a managed service. You move into the SI space, and when you're addressing that client base, then they want to take different components and package up themselves to sell on to the end users. And then hyperscale is a completely different segment altogether. So I think we've seen in the past, certainly the last 5 years, that convergence of the traditional wholesale and retail space. That's come together, and connectivity solutions have become more in demand and more enhanced. And along with that, I think the main change you've seen is around density requirements and this sort of thing as well, that's been changing as those end user requirements within the rack are changing themselves as well. So the onset of cloud also changed a number of those things, and that's all obviously linked into enterprise digital transformation and the move into hybrid or completely off-prem solutions as well. So there's a number of factors driving the demand, and from the colo side of things, that all translates into megawatts and kilowatts of capacity growth. So I think we'll continue to see strong, sustained growth within the colocation sector for the foreseeable future.
Okay, and one other thing, that trend-wise, I've noticed that some people are beginning to offer or talk about on-premise colocation. The idea being that your customer may have some hardware in your third-party colo, if you like, but there's potentially a reason for keeping their kit on their own premises, and you or someone else providing a sort of data center, a colo, as the name suggests, on premise. Is that something you're beginning to see? Do you have any thoughts as to how that, how viable, how likely that is to develop?
Yeah, I think it's an increasing trend, certainly in terms of inquiries coming in. I'm not so sure that I would say it's become mainstream yet as a deployable solution. End user enterprises are going through significant transformations themselves, and with a lot of that, there's a little bit of suck it and see going on there. So I think CIOs and enterprises feel a lot more comfortable moving initially with that step into a hybrid solution, and then that in itself may dictate and clarify what is then required as that next step, whether that is moving to this on-prem, off-prem service. We, as that, again, full stack service provider, will offer and manage all of those solutions anyway, so we can do those end-to-end managed service solutions, if you like, rather than it just being seen as you have to come and collocate in our data center and that's it, that's where things end. So again, that's one of the advantages, I guess, of the NTT limited breadth of service portfolio that we can offer.
And one other thing we is almost compulsory in chats about data centers is sustainability. Now, with COP26 just around the corner, you might not want to say too much, hold yourself to ransom, if depending on what happens in, is it 6 or 7 weeks time. But I guess if you're able to give us some general thoughts as to I guess NTT's sort of approach to sustainability, what's been achieved and what might be in the pipeline, and if you're happy to, maybe some thoughts more generally on how the sector, data center sector itself has managed so far, and what perhaps is still to be done.
Sure. As you said, COP26 is coming up in I think about 8 weeks time now, so I'll keep our powder dry on a lot of those elements. I think as NTT Group, we're a UN Business Avenger. We're very focused on sustainability. In 2019, we launched NTT Anode, which is our renewable energy focused company within Japan, and so that's very specifically focused on provision, generation, distribution of renewable energy services there. On the data center side, it's obviously hugely prevalent now. It's affecting the whole industry, given we are one of the largest consumers of energy globally. We've looked to embrace this as much as possible. It's been at the forefront of a number of things we've done. In India, for example, we entered into a joint venture and developed a 50 megawatt solar PV plant there to supply the Mumbai campus and support that sustained growth that we have there. In other areas, and some of it's easier with certain developments. Obviously, when you're developing new now, it's easier to embrace and incorporate latest technologies, efficiencies from a design perspective with larger scale operators like ourselves and some of our competitors who have legacy portfolios that are there. That becomes a lot more challenging. But certainly at points of CapEx refresh, we're working very hard to effectively redesign those in-life data centers as well to ensure that they are as energy efficient and sustainable as possible moving forward. I think for the industry as a whole, it's the same issue. And as ever with the data center industry, there's a lot of collaboration that's ongoing as well, both with suppliers, but also with other operators to develop best in practice. It's an issue that faces us all as an industry. So it's something that we're very happy to work together with competitors or everyday competitors, as well as suppliers and technology and energy providers to try and develop the best solutions that we can deploy moving forward.
You mentioned the legacy data centers. Just quickly, if you're happy to make any observation, but it strikes me that at some point we might, as the industry, might just have to say, similarly, I guess, to the fact that petrol and the current petrol and diesel, at some stage we looks like we're going to have to completely switch over to electric. Do you think at some point in the data center industry there might have to be just that acceptance that you can only get legacy data centers to be so energy efficient or sustainable, and you might just have to abandon them and do a massive new building program of data centers that are much more environmentally friendly? Or do you think there is the ability to transform older assets into what's required?
Yeah, I think, look, it depends on the nature of the asset, because some of those assets are obviously critical from a connectivity perspective as well. So, that's not necessarily so easy just to lock up and abandon and move on. Again, there are much smarter people than me in this industry on the technology side of things who are working away at this. I think when it comes to retrofit, there are a number of things that now can be done. Smaller generators, little things like that, that can be done on site when you're going through that retrofit process, and changing some of the MEP that is deployed within can certainly improve energy efficiency and sustainability there. And then on the macro factor, procurement of power, ensuring that there are green renewable energy sources available to the site, and that we can then procure those. So there's some of the sort of smaller steps, if you like, that can be taken, as well as looking at some of those wider, more large scale things that can be done. And then that's all about timing. When it comes to tinkering, if you like, with an in-life mission critical data center, it's obviously critical to ensure uptime at all times. But our engineering teams are very skilled and are working on this as we speak. And so, it's something that is at the forefront, but something that it's very difficult to deploy and deliver, but something we will continue to work on.
And without sort of trying to exhaust the subject, when you folks are looking for a new site, depending obviously on where it has to be geographically to support a market, is sustainability, is its suitability to use alternative green energy, etc., is that one of the factors that influences your final choice of where to build or to take over a brownfield site, for example?
Yeah, it's a major factor, and has been now for the last few years. As we always try and look forward when we're looking at new markets or new site deployment anyway. But I think it's increasingly a factor for the end users as well. So we need to factor that in. Obviously, in certain markets, it's easier than others. Delivering something in Africa lends itself nicely to solar, whereas delivering something in London doesn't necessarily support
rain power. Doesn't exist just yet.
Exactly. So we live in hope that will come one day. So yeah, it depends very much on the market, but again, we look at each development on a case-by-case basis, and we look to build in and incorporate the most sustainable and energy efficient solutions that we can into each design.
Excellent. We've covered a fair amount of ground. Are there any other sort of final thoughts or any other areas to cover or or I say we haven't discussed the kitchen sink, but maybe nearly everything else.
No, I think, I think we touched on, growth markets earlier and where we're looking to expand, and probably only mentioned India in passing. So, there's a lot of growth going on there, as everybody's experiencing and seeing. So that's a major growth market for us. It's a big focus. We've obviously got our Chandivali campus, which is our flagship NetMagic campus in Mumbai. So Mumbai 8 is now being deployed there. We'll have more than 85 megawatts of capacity there. We're opening another 2 hyperscale data center parks up in Navi Mumbai as well, which are now moving into construction phase, and also Chennai as well, which, as we touched on, that's driven by the submarine cable as well. So it's a major market for us from a growth perspective, and we can obviously capture quite a lot of that growth opportunity, not just from traditional colocation, but again, there's a huge demand for full stack ICT services there that are incoming as well. So I think that's kind of the market to watch, along with, as we touched on, Africa and LATAM, which are obviously already well coveted within the industry as well.
Okay, well, that's lovely. It's been great to chat to you. So, John, thanks very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
Great. No problem at all. Thanks, Phil.